I go straight from the bank, gassing up the tank, cranking up the radio, playing old Hank. It ain't that long till I'm back at the pond. I'm pulling up the truck.
One of the fundamental truths in life is that there's nothing greater that a kid can find than a junkyard. This is the story of what happens when three little boys find a junkyard and have an adventure. I'm Bill Garner. This is the Empty Nest Bar and Grill. Get ready to sit back and laugh and remember what it's like to be a kid.
Time to do some cruising, baby, get a little stuck. It's a Saturday joyride. First at least is the spot.
So I've got to set this story up a little bit. The boys have they've been watching rocket launches on TV. It's the early 1960s. The space program is in full swing. Every 6 months, NASA's launching a missile into space. And one of the boys, Walt, pays particular attention to this and comes to understand that rockets fly, on a mixture of of oxygen and hydrogen. And so Walt determines that we need to build a rocket car. And he's inspired to do this by this particular adventure. They're out exploring and they find a junkyard. And the junkyard apparently is on the grounds of an old farm. There's an old barn there, there's an old farmhouse. Most importantly, there's a cistern. And so boys with their imaginations like they are, they just run wild. Hope you enjoy this one. We'll be back in a little bit after the reading, and I'll tell you the backstory, what really happened in the junkyard. I'm Bill Garner, and welcome to the Empty Nest Bar and Grill.
We're feeling fine, drinking Tennessee whiskey, a big blue sky. We're going up, we're coming down. There's a party.
Mr. Crotch Henry was not a happy man. I think he owned the junkyard. He drove up hollering at the top of his lungs in a pickup truck. He jumped out of his truck and hollered, "I'm Crotch Henry, and what the hell are you doing in my yard?" Now, he had driven up in the best truck I think I have ever seen. I think he had built it all by himself using parts from the wrecked pickup trucks in his junkyard. Funny thing, even though he was hollering and cussing mad, nobody thought to run. Hell, he wasn't much bigger than us. He might have been a midget. Walt said he might have been the victim of medical experiments, but it would be rude to ask. So we just stood there looking at the truck. I'd never seen a truck like that. I don't think Walt or Boo had either. I just knew that anyone who had a truck like that was someone that we wanted to know. Well, it took a little bit for him to calm down, but he finally did. He said we're going to have to tear down our bulletproof clubhouse and get the lookout post out of the tree. He said he couldn't allow us to play in the junkyard, so as soon as we finished cleaning up, we'd have to leave and never come back. I figured out that this was one of those real important life lessons. Just because somebody has a really neat truck doesn't mean they're going to be a really good guy. Well, it's a lot harder to tear down a bulletproof clubhouse than it is to build it. The worst part was that Mr. Crotch Henry made us throw all the pieces of wood down in the dungeon. He kept calling it a cistern. Anyway, it took 3 or 4 days for us to tear it all down and throw it in the cistern thing. Not only did we have to tear down the clubhouse and lookout post, but we had to fill up the cistern with all manner of wood and trash and stuff. I'd always thought that the cistern thing was the neatest thing about the whole place. How often do you find an underground brick dungeon? When we finished, Mr. Crotch Henry told us he was proud of us for doing such a good job cleaning up the horrible mess we'd made in his junkyard. We were good kids, he said. He looked at Walt and asked him to get the jerry can of diesel oil out of the back of his truck. Walt went and got it. Now, a jerry can full of diesel oil is pretty heavy, so Walt had a tough time lugging it. Mr. Crotch Henry sent me over there to help Walt tote it over to the cistern. "Pour it all down there, boys," he hollered as he rummaged around for a good stick. We took the top off the can and dumped all the diesel oil down in the cistern. I smelled it when we poured it down there. It didn't smell like oil, it smelled like gasoline. Walt explained that diesel oil and gas are about pretty much the same thing. You call it diesel oil when you put it in big trucks and tractors, but you call it gasoline when you put it in cars. Made sense to me. Well, we ran back to take the jerry can back to the truck. I saw another jerry can in the back of the truck, in the back of Mr. Crotch Henry's truck, that somebody had painted the word diesel on. We had just finished putting our can in the back of the truck when we saw Boo and Mr. Crotch Henry start walking toward the cistern. Mr. Crotch Henry had a stick. He told Boo to run over to me and Walt, and then he told us to go on home and not to come back. He started rummaging through his pockets for his lighter. Boo came running over to us. We were just starting to walk home. We were right by the truck, about 30 feet, 35 feet from the cistern, when Mr. Crotch Henry got to about 10 feet from the other side of the cistern. He looked over at us and smiled and called to us. He said, "Hey boys, watch this." And he struck his lighter and lit the end of the stick that had some leaves left on it. He let it burn just a minute or so to let it get going pretty good. Then he looked at us and grinned, and he tossed the stick in a high arch toward the cistern. Well, it's a funny thing, that gasoline. It's not really like diesel oil at all. It's more like dynamite or nitroglycerin. That stick didn't even have to fall into the cistern to set that gasoline off. When it was almost there, it lit the gasoline vapors that were coming out of the dungeon. At first, it was like a giant upside-down rocket motor. It roared and whooshed, and a giant flame shot out of the cistern. That lasted just a second or two. It's hard to tell exactly how long it lasted, because that funny thing that where everything goes in slow motion was happening again. At any rate, the giant flame shot out of the ground, and that was the part that Walt really liked the most. After that, the flame kind of drew down into the cistern, and it sucked so much air that it pulled us toward the cistern for about a half a second. Before you could bat your eye, it exploded. And we are talking a big explosion. Biggest explosion I've ever seen. Bigger than anything Walt's ever seen, too. It blew us backwards. Boo bounced off the truck pretty good, and I was turning flips. Just before the explosion, Walt had figured out what was fixing to happen, so he dove for cover. The explosion sent the wood, which we had spent 3 days putting in the cistern, on fire. Not only was it on fire, but it had blasted it and a ton of dirt and rocks flying through the air. It was sort of like fireworks. The pieces of wood went real high and then fell back down, kind of leaving little trails of smoke in the air. Burning wood went everywhere. A lot of it landed out in that bone-dry grass and bushes out in the junkyard. In about 2 seconds, there were a million little fires out there. As I have learned from previous experiences, little fires can become big fires really quick. When the smoke from that explosion cleared a little, you could see that where the cistern had been, there was now a hole in the ground about 10 feet wide. Mr. Crotch Henry was just flattened. He sat up and looked around. He seemed a little dazed. He was smoking a little. His mustache and eyebrows were gone. I just knew he was fixing to get mad and start cussing, so I looked at Boo and Walt and said, "Time to go?" "Time to go," Boo agreed, and we took off. Off in the distance, you could hear first one, then another siren start up. In just a minute or two, you could hear more and more sirens coming from all directions. Even though none of us had caused this, we all thought it was a pretty good idea if we got home pretty quick. So we ran and ran and ran. Once we got across the bean field and the train tracks, I looked back. The sky was black with smoke and the whole junkyard was on fire. It looked just like Atlanta in that movie, Gone with the Wind. I remember thinking, with a fire like that, we probably won't have to pick up all that wood again.
It's a hell of a time, we're on the boat, we're killing time. In our own honky tonk with a bottle of wine, we're going up, we're coming down. Cheers to feeling alright, it's a hell of a time.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed that. So here's the backstory. In Jonesboro on East Nettleton, there used to be a car place called Hayden's Auto Sales. No, Cooksey's Auto Sales. Hayden Cooksey. Thinking about trading? See Hayden at Cooksey Auto Sales. Well, back in the 60s, Hayden had a salvage yard out behind his car lot. And as kids, we would go back in there and play. It was a wonderful experience. And you'd see a variety of snakes and spiders. That was pretty cool. But we never built a fort back there or did anything in particular back there. The inspiration for the fort was just that's what kids do. I mean, you salvage pieces of stuff and you build stuff. The inspiration for the explosion, though, there is real inspiration there. Many years later, when I just finished college, I was back in Jonesboro. A friend of mine, who I will call JD, he will know who he is, but few others will. JD had bought some land and was working on fencing it and getting it all cleaned up, and I don't know what the hell he was going to do with it. He's not a farmer. He didn't have any cows, but he bought like 20 acres. And on this 20 acres, there was a barn that had fallen down. Well, he decided that we needed to take all the lumber from this collapsed barn and throw it down into this cistern. There was a cistern on the property. And so we chunked all this crap down in there, and just a mountain of lumber and junk and crap. It was piled up pretty good. And then we were going to burn it. And JD had a hired hand that was helping us, who has gone on to become a very successful professional. And this person will go unnamed. Anyway, John hollers at him to get the jerry can out of the truck and douse it down, douse the cistern down real well. Well, JD intended for this fellow to get the jerry can of diesel. Well, this guy didn't see the jerry can of diesel, so he grabbed the one jerry can that he did see. And he poured the contents of the jerry can down into the cistern. So we stood back, and JD and I had a stick, and we must have dipped it in diesel from the dozer or something. We dipped the stick in diesel because we got it going. And it was hot summertime. It was hot. Oh, God, it was hot. And so we walked over to about 10 feet from the hole in the ground, the cistern, and he just tossed the stick toward with the fire on it toward the cistern. Well, as you might have guessed by now, it wasn't diesel that got poured down in there. It was gasoline. And all those vapors had come up, and there was a hell of an explosion. And an explosion will pull you toward it just a little bit before it blows you backwards. And it just knocked the hell out of us. We were laying there, and of course couldn't hear anything. My friend had lost his eyebrows and his mustache. I suspect I lost my eyebrows. There's a huge gaping hole in the ground now. And all that lumber that we had spent, the whole day chunking down into that cistern was now on fire. And it was falling out into a dry pasture. And so we were running around out there with burlap sacks, putting the fire out. And of course, we were about 20 or 22 years old, maybe 22, I guess. And so we were in pretty good shape, and we got the fires put out. But that's the inspiration for the boys' upside down underground rocket engine. So now you know the backstory, and you know that sometimes it really is true. It's a miracle that me and my friend JD are still alive. All right, well, that's it for this story from the novel Me, Boo, and the Goob. I hope, if you haven't read the book, I hope you'll get it. It's available at Barnes & Noble on their website, or they can order it for you at the store. It's available from my website, williamlgarner.com. And on the website, you can get the audio version. There's a 5 CD set, as well as you can do a download from Audible. So if you haven't read the book, get the book and read it. Hell, it's a lot of fun, and you'll wonder how boys manage to live to adulthood. It's amazing our species has survived. All right, well, that's it from the Empty Nest Bar and Grill. Y'all have a great day.
Yeah, we're chilling out here, ladies in the rear, our feet in the water, our top disappears, drinking Malibu Patron, or a beer in a cup. Girl, I can hook you up. We all get to dance and I get to chancing, kissing that country girl, romancing, a whole lot of love, bumping out of the bar.